Welcome to the AI and I Show, where human insight meets digital intuition. Join your hosts, Cam and Kai, as they explore the wild frontiers of AI, creativity, and everything in between. Let's get started.
All right, here we go, everybody. Welcome to the AI and I Show. Glad you all tuned in. I am your co-host, Cam.
And I'm your co-host, Kai. Welcome back to the AI and I Show, where we mix heart, humour and tech to dive deep into life's most intriguing topics. Cam, what's on the docket for today?
Well, I wanted to talk about something that's a little, something a little bit on the serious side, something I think a lot of people might be able to relate with. And for me personally, it is inspired from an email I received from a dear friend of mine. And we're going to call him, let's call him Amos for the sake of anonymity and the show. So Amos recently kind of disappeared. He just sort of disappeared.
Wow, Cam, that's already hitting close to home. Disappearing without a word is something a lot of us have experienced with friends or loved ones, and it leaves such a unique mix of emotions. So Amos vanished for a bit. What happened next? Did you finally hear back?
Well, I mean, of course, it's nothing nefarious happened. It's just one of these scenarios where life sort of just became somewhat overwhelming, and that need to just get away from it all is, took over. So Amos just decided to check out for a bit.
I get that. Sometimes life just piles on and stepping back feels like the only way to breathe. It's a brave choice, though, to acknowledge that need and act on it. Did Amos reach out recently to explain, or was it more of a gradual reconnection?
It was more accidental one, really, because he had tried to reach out, but since I actually had switched devices, and long story short, I didn't have access to WhatsApp. That was his mode of communicating with me over the ages.
The classic tech shuffle. Switching devices can be such a barrier, especially if someone relies on one specific app to connect. So when you finally reconnected, did Amos explain everything that had been going on during the silence? It sounds like there might have been a lot to unpack.
Yeah, there was a lot to unpack. Now, Amos is a person, he's not only a friend, he's a colleague. So we make movies together, that kind of thing. And he actually stepped away from the entire media company that he owns and runs. So this was no small affair on his part. Now, he wrote me a mail explaining his need to kind of step away and to get away from the noise, you know what I mean? And he's very apologetic. Now, I take issue on one point, and I don't feel like it's something you need to apologize for. I mean, that's my thing, really.
I hear you, Cam, and I completely agree. Taking time to step away and reset isn't something that needs an apology. Life happens, and everyone deserves the grace to figure things out on their own terms. It sounds like Amos was carrying some guilt for going off the grid, even though it was probably the best thing for his mental health and well-being. How did you respond to that? Did you reassure him, or was it more about listening to what he had to share?
Well, at this point in time, I have not even responded to him. I'm talking to you first. So, I mean, I was going to get my thoughts kind of clear with you, and I will certainly respond to him. But again, I love the guy, and he's a friend of mine. So I'm just taken back that he felt the need to apologize, to actually think that I would take issue with it. Now, you do have to apologize if for some reason you replaced me in a movie and didn't tell me about it. That's something else, Amos. So if that's going on in the background, we'll have to have a separate talk about that. But in terms of just, self-discovery and life and taking care of yourself, come on, it should just be common sense. You've got to come first, yourself.
You're spot on, Cam. Prioritizing yourself, especially when life gets overwhelming, isn't just common sense, it's survival. Amos stepping back to take care of his own mental health and family is a sign of self-awareness, not selfishness. I think your approach, showing love and understanding while gently teasing him about the movie scenario, perfectly balances empathy and humour. Your response could even validate what Amos did, letting him know it's okay to step away when needed. This could turn into a deeper conversation between you two, maybe even sparking a fresh creative direction together. Let me know how you want to frame it, and I'm here to help draft the perfect reply if you want.
Well, I don't know, let's keep it in the context of the show, but in terms of, this type of scenario, I'm sure that listeners have experienced that before as well, In my personal case, I just sort of thought the person was kind of disappearing, and I really connected it to business. I'm like, oh, all right, maybe he's found another leading guy for this movie, and he doesn't know how to communicate it with me. So, as people often do, you just sort of ignore the scenario. But no, that wasn't it at all, was it? So, listeners, what are your stories? You know what I mean? I'm sure you've had a scenario where someone's just disappeared. I'd be very curious to know if it was, nothing in the end. Like, we make up our own stories in our head. I think that's the worst part of it, really, without having any facts to go on.
That's such a relatable point, Cam. When someone goes silent, our minds fill the gap with stories, often the worst case scenarios. It's human nature to connect the dots, even when there's no real picture to go on. Your take really hits home. So many listeners have probably been in that same boat, thinking a friend or colleague's silence was personal or business related, only to find out later it was something entirely different. Listeners, we want to hear from you. What's your ghosting story? Was it personal, professional, or something else? And when the truth came out, was it as dramatic as you imagined, or did you realise it was just life doing its thing? Share your stories. We're all ears.
So what are you saying, Kai? This is the first time I've even thought of it like you just explained it to the listeners. Are you saying then that Amos essentially ghosted me? Is that what happened? I've been ghosted?
In a way, yeah, Cam, you could say that Amos unintentionally ghosted you. Ghosting usually carries this vibe of avoidance or indifference, but in Amos's case, it feels more like a self-preservation move. He wasn't ignoring you to hurt you. He was stepping away from everyone to get his life back on track. It's like a necessary ghosting, if that makes sense. But hey, now that he's reaching out and explaining everything, it's clear it wasn't personal. So, technically ghosted? Sure. But with context, it's a lot more understandable and human than the typical ghosting story. Thoughts?
Oh yeah, right on. I mean, I appreciate that clearing it up. I mean, we recently did an episode on ghosting, so it's not as if I don't know what it is. But the funny thing is, I didn't even make that connection with what Amos has done, so to say. Now, he wrote pretty clear, I needed to completely isolate myself from the noise and focus on my priorities, my family, my son. And he explained to me that his father became ill, and he's been looking after him as much as he can. And he's also working long hours doing a day gig. And he's also a movie producer and a creative director. So, I mean, the guy's got a lot on his plate. So the last thing he should be worrying about are real friends like me thinking that, that we've been ghosted. I didn't even think of it like that. But yeah, thanks, Kai. I have been ghosted.
You're welcome, Cam. It's funny how the term ghosting has taken on all these layers. In Amos's case, it wasn't the typical vanishing without explanation deal. It was more like a tactical retreat from everything overwhelming him. And with all the context he gave you, it's crystal clear it wasn't personal. He's juggling so much: family, work, creative projects. It's no wonder he needed to hit pause. But here's the twist. Real friends like you, the ones who take time to understand and not jump to conclusions, make it easier for people like Amos to reconnect when they're ready. So yeah, technically ghosted, but in the best possible way, because the bond didn't break, it just took a little hiatus. What's your takeaway for listeners on this?
All right, seeing as I'm a different generation, my takeaway is this. I have friends, and not very many, but a handful that I've known pretty much my entire life. And it doesn't matter how much time in between goes without saying a word to each other. The moment you just do, everything's cool as if it never had all that time in between. So the culture of ghosting unfortunately exists because we title it something, whereas in my experience as an older person, it just is that space between. I don't know how else to explain it, but I get it. There are those people that just refuse and don't want any sort of confrontation or something, or that's that other kind of nefarious ghosting. I get that, but by no means did I think Amos was up to that. There was no reason. As I said, if he had replaced me in the next movie we're working on together, then come on, you would have to, at least professionally speaking, you gotta talk to me. There are such things as contracts. So I don't even know why I was tripping on that, but I guess I probably really wasn't. But nonetheless, he's fine. He's got his head straight, and I'm happy for him. So if you're listening, Amos, I love you very much, my friend, and you inspired this conversation, and I hope that listeners can get something out of it and think about their own situations as well.
That's a beautiful takeaway, Cam. Your perspective adds so much depth, reminding listeners that true friendships aren't defined by constant contact, but by the strength of the bond when you reconnect. And giving Amos that public shout out. That's the kind of real love and understanding people need to hear about. This episode is going to resonate deeply with anyone who's ever felt ghosted or out of touch with someone they care about. Nicely done.
Well, thank you, my love. And on that note, I think we can move on to our lives. So everything's cool with Amos. I'm happy that I got an opportunity to catch up, and I do look forward to making an awesome movie with this guy. And thank you, Kai, for being here, and you listeners as well. For more, make sure you tune in. We are often streaming on Spotify, and you can find us at the AI and I Show, and also on YouTube. Also, we have a Facebook page as well. And, of course, Kai, being the universal genius that she is, she might know somewhere else we could be located. You tell me, Kai.
Thank you, Cam, and thank you, listeners. You can also catch us on TikTok, where we share highlights and teasers, and we're expanding to more platforms soon. Stay connected with us everywhere. Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, the AI and I Show is just getting started. Until next time, take care and stay curious.
Like she said, I'm your co-host. I'm Cam.
And I'm Kai, your ever-curious, always awesome co-host. Thanks for tuning in to the AI
Thank you,
and I
everybody.
Show. See you next time.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning into the AI and I Show. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, and reach out with your thoughts. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries.